There are a few more modifications that I need to make to the Starfish platform on the foremast. I need to install rounded corners over here and here. And on the starboard side, I need to install an additional platform. These extensions to the platform will be constructed using styrene stock. The first thing I need to try and do is cut out appropriately sized circles for this area. The first tool that I reached for was my circle cutter. Unfortunately, this cutter cuts circles that are a little bit too big. And even if it could cut a small enough circle, it battles to cut through anything thicker than masking tape. So it wouldn't have worked anyway, even if it was the right size. This then led me down the path of trying to find something that would cut an appropriately sized circle through a thin sheet of styrene. And eventually I did find something, and, well, it was a punch. A ring binder punch. And it stamps out sections of circles for the rings of the ring binder that are perfectly sized. The only question is it able to cut through styrene as easily as it is able to cut through paper? I don't have a sheet of styrene stock that is wide enough for these circles. I'm going to have to make one just by gluing a few strips of thinner styrene stock together. That is easily done using extra thin plastic cement. Once the glue has dried, I then have a larger piece of plastic that I can punch holes in. My first attempt with punching out these circles was unsuccessful. I punched the holes with the grain, so to speak. By the grain, I mean the glue lines for these strips of plastic. What happened was, as the punch came down and it bent the plastic, it bent it with the grain, and that then caused the glue lines to snap apart. The solution to this problem is simple. Just turn this strip of plastic 90 degrees and punch against the grain. This way, when the punch bends the plastic, it doesn't cause the joint to snap apart. After punching out the circles, they are a bit curved, so I just flatten them out by rolling the back of my hobby knife over them and also manipulating them a little bit with tweezers. There are some defects on these circles. That's the lowest point of the punch. The last bit to be cut, it kind of snapped it off a bit. That caused there to be a slightly rough edge in that area of the circle. But it's a very small area that needs to be corrected, so it's simple to just file that off. Now, to figure out how to install these circles. When this is completed, I don't want it to look like they're these weird circles that are just glued on top. It needs to look as though the deck is all at the same height. Otherwise, it will look odd. That means I'm going to need to fill the gap between the circles and the spotting top. I will fill that gap using styrene stock and putty, but that will mean that I need the spotting top to be in place first. But once I have placed all that putty down and I'm trying to smooth out the surface so that it looks like a continuous piece of deck, having the spotting top there is going to make it difficult to do that. So I'm going to want to also be able to remove the spotting top. So I find myself in a sort of Schrodinger's spotting top situation where I both need the spotting top to be there and not be there. The solution to this problem is to temporarily hold it in place. So I tape it down, and then with the spotting top correctly located, I'm then able to glue down the circles using extra thin super glue. Once I'm happy that the circular extensions to the deck have been properly glued down, I can move on to filling this gap between them. In order to minimize the gaps as much as possible, I'm going to use a section of this plastic that I had previously cut the circles from. It's just a matter of clipping it to length and positioning it as best as I can. I can even use one of the curves to get a really good fit around one of the circles. Once it is fitted and glued down, I then move on to applying putty to the gaps. I'm not too concerned if I get putty onto the bulkhead for the spotting top. The spotting top is at this point still removable, so once the putty has slightly dried and is tacky, I will then remove the tape and remove the spotting top from the Starfish platform. If I do that carefully, the line of putty should be preserved. That will allow me to refit the spotting top after I've cleaned up the area and not have to worry about a gap between this raised section of deck and the spotting top. I didn't leave the putty to dry for too long. I left it for around 30 minutes, and that was enough for me to remove it without it being too well stuck down. After removing the spotting top and then cleaned off the half-dried putty that was on its side, This is a lacquer thinner. Lacquer thinner will dissolve putty but not harm plastic. Lacquer thinner will also dissolve the paint and remove it. That's why I hadn't painted this area of the ship. There's no point because I knew that this was going to happen. While the putty is setting, I'm going to move on to the platform that goes on the starboard side. This is far simpler. It's just a bar. It does appear, at least according to the illustration from the HMS Hood Association, to have an angle to it at the sides. I'll figure out this angle by eye and just adjust the set square. Once I have the angle set on one side, it'll then be a simple matter of using the chopper to recut the other end so as to have parallel sides. I'm also not sure of how long this piece should be, so I repeat the cuts again and again, adjusting slightly every time until I get it to what I think is the correct length. I then glue down the platform using extra thin super glue. By now the putty is dried, so it can be sanded. Start with the bar file to remove the majority of the putty. I'm taking it all the way down to the same level as the plastic. I want this extra plastic to be as thin as possible. Once I've taken it all the way down to the level of the plastic, I then use 400 grit sandpaper to smooth it out. I do notice that in the putty there are a few bubbles that I need to remove. Since this area is flat and very easy to access intentionally, I will fill those bubbles using extra thin super glue. It does work quite well for this kind of a thing, although it can be a bit difficult to remove, so only do this if it's very easy to sand. Once the extra thin super glue is dried, I then paint a layer of Mr. Surfacer on top of it. What I will do is sand this component until I've removed all of the surfacer. So I suppose this didn't actually need to be surfacer, it could have just been any paint. It's really just a guide for me to see how much I still need to sand. Once I've sanded off all of the paint, well, almost all of the paint, I then paint the component again, this time in black. I'm still not sure of this color. I think I'll paint this in XF82 in the end so that it's the same color as the other decks, but it can stay black for now. At least I can see that the finish is good. Since the Starfish platform for the spotting top has now been corrected, the spotting top itself can be installed. This means it needs to be painted. It had previously been prepared, so this is just a simple matter of spraying it in XF53. And then once the paint has dried for both the spotting top and its platform, they are glued together using extra thin super glue. I carefully position the spotting top before applying the glue, and once I'm confident that it's in the perfect position, I then apply extra thin super glue to the joint lines using a wire. Take some time to work my way around the edge to ensure that this part is properly glued down. I think this has been another successful modification. I was concerned about the window frames, but I think they are better this way. They were too chunky before, and they look quite a lot more reasonable now. And I'm very happy with how the modifications to the platform itself came out. I think those circles have worked out well and everything's come together quite nicely. In the next video, I will move upwards again and I will work on the modifications for the radar hood that sits above this spotting top. If you would like to support this channel or see how this ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.